So this is my 1953 Willys M38A1 military Jeep. When I bought this thing, it had been sitting in this guy's driveway where it hadn't moved or been started in like 10 years. And the brakes were seized up and he wasn't even sure if it would run again. But when I bought it, it took me not too long to get it running again, but the brakes still need work at this point. So the story as he knew it was, once this thing left military service, it was sold to a fire department up in Michigan, who then painted it red, made a few upgrades that we'll talk about later, and then they used it to fight forest fires. Once it came out of service from the fire department, it was sold to a guy who then painted it back to green and supposedly used it just for parades. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a good look at this thing from front bumper to rear bumper and put it up in the air and take a look at it from underneath. So to start with, the bumpers here, I think were put on by the fire department because the rear bumper covers the pintle hitch. And if you watched my video on the trailer that goes with this thing, you already know that. But if you're new to my channel and haven't seen that, yes, I do have the civilian version of the old M100 trailer that goes behind these things, or the Ben-Hur trailer, as a lot of people know them as. But mine was one that was sold through David Bradley Sears catalog. And I did that video like a couple of videos ago. And if you want to go check it out, go check it out. Or I'll put a link in the description if you don't want to go back through my earlier videos. But anyway, we're going to leave these things on there because I don't think I want to cut them off unless I decide later on I want this thing to be more authentic than it is. But when we do get this thing back on the road, we do have these 53 plates. That is the Ohio Sesquicentennial, which is the 150-year anniversary of Ohio, which I think is really cool to have with this thing. So the front is just a memorial plate and the back is an actual number plate. So this is a fairly early production model because it has the seam through here. I don't remember exactly when they changed this, but fairly early in production they went to a one-piece fender. Now this thing does have some rust repair that was done, I believe, by the fire department here, where all they did was just put the strip over top and weld it on. But the rust isn't really bad behind there. When we get up in here, we'll take a closer look at that. So now we'll look underneath the hood. Of course, these things had the old Hurricane, was it 134 engine, I think they called it. Which is an F-head type engine, which means it's got overhead valves for, I believe, the intake side, and then in-block valves for the exhaust side. And now when I took the side cover off and checked the adjustment on the valves after I put it back on, I've had a problem with the fuel system. It went from being a little slow to pumping fuel to having to run 2 float bowls worth of fuel out before it would even start pumping fuel, but then it pumps just fine after that. So I think there's something wrong with that venting system there that ties in with the crankcase for being able to run this thing underwater. And if anybody out there has one of these and has dealt with that and knows what the problem is, go ahead and comment below so I don't have to do quite so much research and playing around to figure it out. But meanwhile, I've been running it on this because of that. Of course, we're not trying to drive it on the street yet anyway because the brakes still don't work. But this thing has had an aluminum radiator in it, which we believe the fire department put in. Now, since I've had it, I put in a new upper radiator hose, thermostat and housing, and new belts because we did have a leaking, and a water pump, because I did have a leaking water pump. So anyone who knows these things is looking at this and going, what in the heck is that? Well, when I bought this thing, the original carburetor was long gone. And it had a civilian version carburetor on it, but it didn't run that well on that one. And I tried to clean it, and put a kit in it, and it still just didn't run very well on it. So then I ended up buying one of those Indian knockoffs, and I put that on there. And while it ran decent enough while it was running, it was very hard to start on that one because the vent on the football was really large on that thing, and it would just evaporate completely dry. And with the fuel system problems I was already having, which got worse with the venting problem, it made it very difficult to do anything with this thing. So I decided, I got plenty of these things around. The throat size is 1.5 inches, just like the original carburetor, that I put this on it. This is an SU carburetor from an MGB. I went ahead and made up this adapter here and all the linkages here. Now, I did not drill, cut, or do any modifications whatsoever to anything on the Jeep itself. This is 100% undoable. I can take this off, put the original stuff back on anytime I want. I got it sitting in a box up on the shelf. But this is a carburetor that I know I have lying around and I know I could work with for no money. And you know, I've also got another YouTube channel that I've been playing with for a number of years where I did this on that other channel because it's YouTube. But it runs better on this carburetor than it did on either of those two and starts much easier. But what I did on this was I took a look at this carburetor and just kind of look at the needle and said, how much do I think I need to shave off this thing to provide enough fuel for this? Took a stab at it, thinned it out that much, put it on, and so far, no problems whatsoever. Started, idled right off the bat, and we haven't had it on the road yet, but just driving it around a little bit around the yard, it seems to be perfectly fine. Now you can see this thing does have a heater on it, and I'll show you that here in a little bit, but it still has the 24-volt waterproof electrical system and the original distributor with all the waterproof wires. Now they definitely do need replaced, but they're not exactly cheap anymore. And in order to change all this out for a more modern system, which I'm thinking about potentially doing at some point, means I have to change the whole thing over to 12 volt and spend more money than I'm ready to spend at the moment. So when I bought this thing, it did come with a brand new aftermarket spare wheel for it. I did get a couple jerry cans with it and a spout for those cans. Of course, when I was in the Army, that's not what we called these things. Now I do believe that the wipers and heater were installed by the fire department, as well as the turn signals here and seat belts. This thing does have 41,559 miles on it. All the gauges are working. When I first got it, I tested. I think all the lights were working, but I'll have to stop and think about how to actually use the switch because it's been a long time since I've used one. So all the data plates are still in place here, though unfortunately they did screw right through one of them to put the heater in here. But when I said this is early production, this thing, the date of delivery to the Army was January of 1953. So now that we got it up in the air, let's take a look underneath. Now see the brakes are stuck, but they just barely drag a little bit. So I couldn't really drive it much, but it does have a steering dampener that's been added to it at some point. And I do have a spare transmission for this thing, but the one I have, I believe, is actually for a flat fender Jeep, not for this year Jeep. But that's what came with it. We got a few oil leaks, but that's completely to be expected. Now, our outriggers here are rusted on both sides with a little bit of rot in the floor, and we're starting to get some here too. But that's not really terrible considering the Army just let these things sit outside all the time. I don't even think they usually had a top on them, except for like maybe a bikini style top. This side is not quite as bad. And we can see it didn't rust through this side, so all the rust was in the outside. So without taking that off, we don't really know how bad it really was on both sides here. But the chassis seems to be pretty good on this thing, and most of the floors doesn't have much rust in it at all. So that's all pretty good on this thing, considering how long it sat before I got it, and unfortunately since I've had it. I think it's faring pretty well at this point. And here before too long, we're hoping to actually get started working on this thing again, getting the brakes going, figuring out the fuel pump issue, and hopefully we'll be able to actually register it for the road and start using it a little bit. Maybe take it to some parades. We'll see.